I think it's what receded my hairline. Yeah. Hey everyone,
Village
welcome
Kids.
to the Village Kids, a podcast hosted by four childhood best friends. I'm Julia.
I'm Erin.
I'm Annika.
And I'm Marga.
Okay, so for today's episode, we're talking about how we deal with stress and anxiety. You heard my anxiety just saying anxiety, so. So, what stresses you out the most, guys? Back in college, what was it? Your triggers.
Ooh.
The future.
Mm,
Yeah.
Oh. The
Not
uncertainty?
yeah, uncertain
Uncertainty.
not living up to this expectation I had
mm.
of myself.
My gosh, college days.
How about you, Joel?
I think, apart from academics, it was like a thought in my mind that, will the rest of my life look like this? Or,
Right.
yeah, it was just literally uncertainty what really caused my anxiety for the most part.
It's such a common theme, I think, being in college and having to, I think that's one step closer towards the real world, right?
Mm, yeah.
So, unlike when you were in high school or grade school, it felt like sky's the limit in a sense. Um, that the real world was still far because you still had other barriers to go over. And it's such a worry, I think, also for some people who maybe aren't as linear. Like, for example, in the Philippines, if someone went to high school knowing they were going to med school, their worries would be more of getting into school and then getting into
Mm,
school. It wouldn't be more of like what comes next because they
yeah.
knew what was next. So I think it's super common for our anxieties to be more of the uncertainty, especially if you're choosing a path less traveled.
Mm,
And, I think coming from the province, a lot of us moved out, right? I mean, all of us moved out basically from where we grew up.
mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of uncertainty moving to a new place and just a lot of external factors of trying to just navigate university away from home.
Yeah, and meeting new people.
Yeah. I guess like
Not
what was your experiences on that? Like with the coping of like being introduced to like new experiences and having to deal with like I don't know, anxieties of being in a new place or that stressors.
I don't think I was ever stressed about moving because I would still see my family. They would
Mm,
always like come and visit, or I think I was used to not seeing my family that often because at one point my siblings were based in the States, and my mom would often visit, and I lived with my sister. So I never was homesick living in Manila. I was pretty chill with like the environment, the moving part. How about you
For
guys?
me, for me, same. Cause like going into college, I first stayed in a dorm,
Mm,
so I knew that the people I'd be hanging out with also moved out from home. Like
yeah.
people who lived in dorms. In UP, you have a higher chance of getting into dorms if you live farther from it.
Mm,
So
mm,
like for sure the people that you live in the dorms with are people who are like not from Manila.
yeah.
mm,
Yeah. So I went into college thinking that like we're all standing on the same ground here. Like we're all
Mm,
new.
yeah.
College is new. Although in my college, like a lot of the people there came from high schools like nearby,
Mm,
and
mm,
a lot of them had friends going into college. I felt like I don't know, something about first year me was just a lot more reassured, just that things would
mm.
just play out the way it
well,
will.
yeah.
Yeah.
When would you say it came in like more of uncertainty? Since you said like first year you was more reassured of herself, do you feel like that changed any moment within university? Like, did you ever have like second thoughts?
Okay, so like Annika previously talked about this. But like when you go into college, you go into a much bigger pond.
Mm.
And like the uncertainty that that brings, because like coming from Davao, it's like you live in this bubble and then you think like this is who you are, but then when you go into college and then you meet so many other kinds of people, suddenly you're like, I'm not as prepared as I thought I was. Going into the real world, I'm like, I'm not as intelligent as I thought I was. Like,
Mm.
I mean, naturally, when you go to college, a lot of people are just like, oh, I'm really not as smart as I thought I was.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then you meet so many people who are just so talented. Like, they just know what's up. They
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what they want to be, how what paths they're going to take, what they're going to study on the side to get them there. Like, they're just those people who have it
Yeah.
figured out. And meeting those people suddenly makes you think like, no, I don't have anything laid out for me after college, because I was always just like, okay, like school, you just go with the flow, and then when it's done, life will find you. But no, it don't work that way. After college, you have to find your life. So like, I think even before I graduated, I was already looking for jobs,
Mm.
me and a lot of my batchmates, because tough competition there. So that's saying a lot, because my course after graduation, we still have to go to review to take the
Yeah.
board. So like
Mm-hmm.
trying to look for jobs even before grad is like way advanced. It's
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah.
it's just telling of how anxious we were of the
Mm-hmm.
future, because
Yeah.
like it's really tough out there to look for a job with no experience. And like,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm.
like for me,
Yeah.
I never took an internship. So like my chances are even lower than my batchmates who took
I think
internships.
that's the
A lot
sad
of
thing
them.
about the system here, like the educational system here. Unlike in other countries like the States, school sometimes starts at 9 and that ends at 2. So these
Yeah.
people can look for
Literally.
internships and jobs. So they could actually build up their resumes. But here, we have no choice but just to go to school and then freshly graduate with nothing. And it's so
Yeah.
hard to find a job here.
That's
That's
so
so
true.
true.
That's so sad.
Because like there are jobs that you can get, but they're not necessarily something that you would like to do.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
there were opportunities presented to us, but a lot of us were like, we don't want to go that path.
Direction. Yeah.
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 Full disclosure, it was audit. It's hard,
Mm.
okay? It's
Mm.
not for everyone. So like
Auditing. Yeah.
I feel like for our generation specifically,
Mm-hmm.
like millennials, zillennials, whatever you call it, I feel like generally we're just a lot more purpose seeking. I
Mm.
feel
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
because like coming from like the industrial age or whatever, I don't know, like the boomers were like, we just gotta work hard and like provide for our families. Like that was the top priority. But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like
Mm.
now that the boomers have provided, it's like we're now at the age of like finding what we want to do for the world, how to
Mm.
fulfill our purpose. I don't know, like finding our
Yeah.
whys. Suddenly it's
Yeah.
become this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
That's
it's
so
not
true.
just about family now.
Mm.
Yeah.
I
And
agree.
sometimes it doesn't need to even lead to a family.
Mm.
Sometimes it could be
Mhm.
whatever makes you feel like you're working towards yourself or your future. Because I think this whole stereotype of where your life is supposed to lead, or what I would say is shoved down our throats growing up, because that's all that was really presented to us. And then I'm just seeing all of these outliers, or all of these people just paving their own way in society or in this world. It's kind of inspiring just to see someone could be happy doing things that are unconventional. And I think that's also something that adds a little anxiety sometimes, because do you really know yourself? Do you really know what you want? Are you really in it for that? Are you taking enough risks? Do you want to? I mean, all of these questions are so valid.
Mm.
And I would say a lot of these questions pass through my mind or have passed through my mind like at 2 a.m. all throughout college. And I've made a lot of big decisions because of those questions. They're quite thought provoking. So I think I was just so lost so many times, and I felt that I needed clarity, but I was
Mm,
never going to get that 100% clarity in college. It really had to be me throwing myself out into the world.
yeah.
And that's so scary because I always thought of the concept of time as something that eventually I'm going to run out. And I may not have enough quick maths in my head to make sure I live a full life. I don't know if you feel that way, how you want to do it right, but you only have one life.
Dude, I told you guys about my Peter Pan syndrome, right? Like
Yes,
20s, don't leave me.
yes, yes. Because 20s are supposed to be, as Erin has mentioned in the last podcasts, but 20s are supposed to be the moment that you just go out into the world and do things, right? And it's so hard because it's going by so fast. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not even at the mid
Mm.
of this decade of 20s, but I feel it. I feel the lines forming. I feel the aches in my body. I talked to Julia about this. I start to feel it. I'm not as young as I thought I was. I know that sounds weird, but I'm not
Yeah.
as young as I thought I
Yeah.
was. And um
Yeah.
I don't know. I just want to make sure that we all make the most out of this time.
Yeah. And it's hard,
Gosh.
especially now we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Crazy. Crazy,
I
crazy.
think like I would definitely echo like what Erin was saying about how our parents were boomers and they've
Mm,
sort of afforded us this privilege
mm,
and that we're able to seek like higher level
yeah.
like needs if it is like the Maslow's hierarchy and we're
Yeah.
definitely trying to make a beeline for like self-actualization
Yeah.
Yeah.
and with that privilege comes a lot of like what Margot is saying, anxiety and
Mm,
pressure
Yeah.
to get it right. We feel like there's so much riding on that because there's so much messaging of like again what Mark's saying, making the most out of everything. And I think as good as that is to want to make the most out of everything, it can also be debilitating.
mm,
It is.
Feeling
It
like you
really
have
is.
to have gotten somewhere at a specific point in your life and that
yeah.
like all of that pressure compounds.
Yeah.
And there's this, I don't remember what book it is, but like the burden of choice. I don't know if you've heard of it, like that the fact that we have so many options, like
So
whether
many
it's
opportunities.
yeah,
It's
whether it's
overwhelming.
what degree to pursue, what
Mm,
internships, what extracurriculars and all of that. And you feel like maybe each of those things are very defining that
mm,
they'll dictate like what internships you get will dictate what career paths are afforded to you. And
mm,
when you compare that to, let's say, our parents, they would maybe say that we're overcomplicating it,
yeah.
or
Uh,
right?
Over
Because
analyzing everything.
back
Yeah.
then, if you pick a path, let's say you want to be an accountant or a doctor, you just, or let's say your parents just back then, their parents probably just told them that that's the path that you should go on. And they'd be like, yeah,
Yeah.
sure, like
Yeah.
most of the time, right? And there's not so much like thoughts about your thoughts and feelings about your feelings the way that
Yeah.
Yes.
we we tend to
yeah.
ruminate on that a lot more. I think for me, that's always just whether it was in college or now, constantly thinking like, am I making the most out of this year? And
Mm,
yeah, it's just hard to step back sometimes,
mm,
I
Yeah.
would
for
say.
sure.
I understand the burden of choice so well. And like the way you explained it with the parents,
Mm,
like after the boards, I was presented with two job offers. And if I was presented with one, I would have gladly gone like, okay, yeah, for sure. I'll go there. Okay, let's say that was the offer A.
mhm,
If offer B didn't come, I would have just been happy with offer A, like completely
mhm,
no thoughts, just like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll take it. But then when the choice came between offer A and offer B, suddenly I was stressing out over it so much that even my parents were like, you don't have to stress yourself out too much. Like you're thinking too far into the future
Mm.
about things that haven't happened yet. And like you don't have to. You're only 23, 22. Like I was only 22 at the time.
Yeah.
You're like, what are you stressing out over? You have so much time left. And if that fails, just go and look for another one.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, you're right. Like, I had like an extensive pro con list, guys. It
I
was
can
really stressing me
imagine.
out. I would
Yeah.
dream about it.
I
Like, I
can
thought
relate.
about it so much. I dream about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember us trying to discuss this too, like the pro and cons before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like being obsessed with making the right decision. And
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
once you maybe
Yeah.
made that decision, maybe this doesn't necessarily apply to you, Air, but you'll also still be looking back, wondering like, what if I went that road instead? When, let's say, you get into like some hard times with the road that you did pick.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
knowing that you had a choice makes it sometimes more complicated and more self-inflicted, like energy removal than
Yeah.
necessary. Yeah.
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 But it's
Sure.
Because there will
easier
always
said
be a
than
what
done.
if,
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
even though you're trying to eliminate the magnitude of it. But being presented with a choice, you're always gonna question, what if I went that road?
Mm.
Um, what if I took that position? Or what if I decided to go about life a whole different way?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's so hard when you're just one person. And, obviously opportunities, like they're only, you can't do it in parallel,
Mm.
and idea of timing also. It doesn't mean that, oh, you won't have a chance at doing those things or trying for a job in that company. Rather, it's just about when you started or when you decided to go on to it, or whether that was, again, the one, you know?
Mm. Yeah, but I think for like if you ask me now, like how I cope with it or how I deal with all those thought provoking questions that I ask myself at 3
Mm,
a.m. We're just human. We really don't know, right?
Yeah.
I think the best thing I learned to do was just to pray about it. I resonate with everyone
yeah.
Yeah.
here.
Same.
It's
I,
so
I
hard.
I feel like with what Julia was mentioning, I feel like I'm not the most religious person, but I know whenever I have those moments of uncertainty, I'll always like go back to church in a sense, like physically. I feel like I need the peace of letting go.
Mm, of offering it up to him.
Yeah, parang okay, I really feel like this is the one, like it struck a chord in me or something.
Yeah.
Sometimes, it could be just a loop de loop. That's what I say it. You go one turn, but it didn't mean that you took a wrong turn,
Yeah.
but rather you just became a better person out of that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that helps me cope also, knowing, just looking back and seeing how
Everything happens for
everything
a
we got,
reason.
yeah. So everything we went over or got over, like it actually, you know, turned out okay. And for me naman, I think that gives you so much peace. Just
Mm.
knowing how you'll be okay no matter what. You're
Yeah.
gonna struggle, you're gonna have pains, you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna you're gonna have moments you regret. But then
Mm-hmm.
at a certain point, hopefully you let go.
I feel
Amen
like
to
what
that.
Margaret said
Yeah.
about the loop de loop,
Mm.
it reminds me of that quote that you actually shared on Instagram, Margie. I think it was something about like
I share so much.
whenever you're going through like a hard time, just remember that you've survived 100% all of the hard times that you've been through before that you thought
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't come through alive.
Yeah.
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 And like that just gives you so much peace like in the moment when you're actually
Mm.
having a hard time. You're like, this is gonna blow over soon anyway. Like
I
Yeah.
think
you're fine. Don't
also
be so dramatic. That's what I tell myself now.
I think it's just also knowing you faced failure
Mm.
head on. Like
Mm.
you've been pushed to a wall
Mm.
but you're here, which again I said is a blessing in a sense that you were able to know that and see that okay, it's not the end.
Yeah.
You're just pushed back.
What you were saying, Mark, is so true. How, I guess, when we deal with hardship, sometimes the easiest thing is to sort of just like continue along that path of like thinking that you know, it'll always be this way because I
Yeah.
am this way and all of that,
Mm.
and regarding yourself in like such a negative light.
Mm.
Um, but I think it's in moments like that when like you should afford yourself like patience and grace and
Yeah.
um sort of take that. It's hard though to get out of that like headspace, but to view yourself in positive regard. And
Mm.
in order to do that, sometimes it's important to, I guess, in terms of coping mechanisms, to be able to have some kind of point of reference
Mm.
from where you started. Because if
Mm,
you
Yeah.
yeah.
don't introspect or commit to memory, the things that you have been able to conquer in the past,
Yeah.
you can't appreciate where you are now.
Yeah.
And so, if anything, a coping mechanism I think that is so good is just jotting down sometimes, hey, I did this when you're feeling low or when you're feeling high, just so that you remember that, it's really a journey and it's not
Yeah.
always up, 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 and it's not going to be always down, down,
Yeah.
down.
Sorry, is someone clicking something?
Oh my
No.
God, that's me.
Is that a
Yeah,
coping
it's a
mechanism?
nervous tick. It's a nervous tick. Speaking of coping mechanisms, for this for this podcast, I feel like I've had to like find a coping mechanism for like because I hate public speaking, and I think maybe
Mm.
Julie can relate.
Same. I
So
think how
yeah,
I cope with it is laugh.
Yeah.
Like ever
yes.
since.
With coffee.
Like ever
When things
since.
get awkward, Julia just
I laugh. Yeah, like even when I was a child, dude, like if I get scolded, I'd laugh. Like at one point my parents were scared of me because I just laugh. Like a 3-year old? Really?
demon child.
Yeah, I swear. That's really my coping mechanism until this very day. So if I laugh, there's nothing wrong with you. It's all about me, girl.
I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do to cope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, my coping mechanism for like back in school when I had to do any like presentations or
Mm.
anything that involved talking, like
Mhm.
this now,
Mhm.
like I know it's just you guys, but as soon as we press record, like
Same,
my
Nick.
mind draws a blank.
Mm.
But what I try to remember
Yeah.
is that for me, it's like how small and insignificant. Like, yes, this has meaning for sure, but like whenever I try to put it into perspective and I think of how I remember a friend told me how we're just like one speck in this like huge universe,
Vast
and
world. Yeah.
ultimately
Yeah.
this is not going to kill you. It's not going like don't worry about it. Like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
moment will pass and
That's so true.
you might as well enjoy
Yeah.
it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good way of
Yeah, actually,
seeing it.
that has also gotten me through like a lot of embarrassing moments. It's like when you do something embarrassing, right? Suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, this person is going to find me so lame forever. And then
Yeah.
suddenly you remember, like, in their world, they are the main character and you're just a
Exactly.
I was
supporting
Yeah.
gonna say the same
character.
Exactly.
thing. Like
Yes.
everyone's just thinking about themselves.
100%.
Yeah,
And
In
that's
the
a relief
video,
sometimes.
remember.
in the video of Ali Abdal, that's like exactly what he says. Technically, everyone's like worried about what other people think,
Mm.
and so they're too busy with that,
Mm-hmm.
worrying about themselves and what other
Themselves.
people think of them.
Yes.
That
Uh-huh.
technically they don't have, the bandwidth to worry about or think
So
about
true.
you,
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
people.
It's
So if we're
freeing.
all just worried
Yeah.
about each other, or
Yeah.
it cancels it out, you know.
Yeah.
You know what I wish a coping mechanism of mine was though?
What?
Like whenever things would go wrong, I wish that I was like my first reaction would be not to react.
Mm.
Mm.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like I wish I just went on problem solving mode like right away.
Mm.
But there's sometimes when you're on a time crunch, like you just suddenly think like the worst possible scenarios that could happen, like just snowballing off of that one thing that went wrong.
Yeah,
It's hard.
it
But like,
is.
It
yeah.
really is hard. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
do
I
try to
agree.
take notes though from like other people who I see, like how they react to things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
From then, that then me to me now is like a bit different now, I hope. Like I hope I am more chill now
Yeah,
compared
I
to
think you
before.
are.
There was a time when I was an ENTJ, guys. And that ENTJ ran deep. I feel like my coping mechanisms just changed slowly,
Mm.
you know? It's
Yeah.
like in high school, you didn't worry about studies because, like, high school, whatever. But then in college, small fish, big pond, right? Suddenly you're trying to graduate because, like,
Yeah.
you can actually not graduate this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, oh my gosh, studying in BAA, like studying for all of our tests
Mm-hmm.
and not actually knowing that, like thinking that you could actually fail. Oh my gosh, I just wouldn't sleep like the
Mm-hmm.
whole night through because my studying method is cramming. So I would just cram from the day before up until the very last moment before the exam. I just don't sleep.
Yeah.
Mm,
Do you guys do that too?
I did
I
that
did back
once,
in high
I
school.
think.
Depends on the
High
subject.
school? Oh,
In
and
grade 11 and 12, oh, for
oh my
IB,
gosh.
I
Oh,
think I
okay,
pulled
yeah,
all
yeah.
my all-nighters that I could, like, for the rest of my life na. So
Do you think
college
that's
was
what
more
age
about
does?
I think it's what receded my hairline. Yeah. BRC. Yeah. BRC. Gotta act quick. It's getting ahead of me.
Yeah.
So I guess with that being said, like Aaron's story about how our coping mechanisms constantly changing, I think it speaks to everyone's stories speak to how we all respond to things differently. And it's only through, I guess, trial and error that we figure out what works best for us.
Yeah.
And I, for one, loved listening to everyone's coping mechanisms and experiences. I kind of feel like it normalized my own. And yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you, whoever's listening now, can relate to what we went through, great. If you can, there's no one size fits all to this. Different scenarios, different people. It's all about number one, acknowledging when you need help with coping and taking a step back from whatever you're doing and just figuring out what worked best for you and being willing to try and see what works. So yeah, thank you so much to everyone for listening. This was a really good chat and I hope you all enjoyed it too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.